largest US banks.
Other news now, we're learning more about the woman who authorities say hacked into Capital One's records, compromising the personal data.
More than 100 million customers, and all it took.
100 million Capital One customers' accounts and credit card applications. It was a high-tech bank robbery, and you may be a victim.
This wasn't some elite nation-state attack. It wasn't ransomware or phishing. It was a simple cloud misconfiguration, left exposed, ignored, and unnoticed. And it cost Capital One over $190 million in fines, remediation, and legal fees. Today, we're breaking down what really happened to Capital One in 2019 and how it became a textbook failure in cloud governance, third-party risk, and GRC fundamentals. Back in March 2019, Paige Thompson, a former US employee, discovered a vulnerability in Capital One's infrastructure. She didn't need a password. She didn't need malware. She simply exploited a misconfigured web application firewall and accessed AWS S3 buckets containing consumer data. Over 140,000 social security numbers, 80,000 plus bank account numbers, and credit application data for more than 100 million people. The breach went undetected for months until Thompson bragged about it on GitHub and Slack. That is how Capital One found out. From the attacker. Now let's break this down from a GRC perspective. Cloud is fast, flexible, scalable, and often mismanaged. In Capital One's case, the WAF was improperly configured, allowing a server-side request forgery attack. The attacker tricked the system into returning sensitive credentials. Those credentials unlocked access to Capital One's S3 storage buckets. The irony? This isn't some obscure exploit. SSRF is a known risk in cloud environments. It's documented in OWASP. It's in every AWS security checklist. So how did a major financial institution miss it? Simple. There was no robust cloud governance framework. In a well-governed cloud setup, you don't just deploy infrastructure. You continuously monitor, audit, and validate it. And clearly, that wasn't happening here. Let's talk about one of the most misunderstood aspects of cloud security, the shared responsibility model. AWS provides the tools. You, the customer, are responsible for securing them. Capital One built their application stack on AWS, but they were the ones responsible for configuring the firewall. They were responsible for IAM roles. They were responsible for alerting and monitoring. A lot of companies assume that if it's on AWS, it must be secure. But here's the GRC reality. Cloud doesn't eliminate risk. It shifts the risk to how you configure, monitor, and govern it. In Capital One's case, the vendor provided the tools, but the organization failed to govern their use of them. One of the scariest parts of this breach, no one noticed it. The attacker was able to access sensitive data and exfiltrate it without triggering real-time alerts. That's not just a visibility issue. It is an audit failure. GRC teams know this. The value of a control is not in that it exists, it's in that it works. And in this case, audit logs weren't being reviewed, centralized, or escalated effectively. For regulated industries like banking, that is a massive problem. You're required to know what's happening in your environment, especially when dealing with personally identifiable information. So the question is, were the logs missing? Were they unreadable? Or was no one looking? All three are bad, and all three reflect a breakdown in GRC. Here's where things get even more interesting. Capital One's GRC program had to account not only for internal risk, but for third-party risk through AWS. And here's the kicker. Even though the flaw originated in how Capital One configured its services, the breach exposed a systematic blind spot. The attacker was a former AWS employee, someone with technical knowledge about the infrastructure, which raises the question, how well do you understand your cloud provider's risk model? Capital One may have trusted the platform, but GRC isn't about blind trust. It's about building layers of control, technical, procedural, and contractual. If your provider is compromised, do you have safeguards? Are you monitoring provider-based threats? Are your SLAs clear on breach notification timelines? These are questions that most organizations don't ask unless they are forced. Capital One ended up paying $80 million in regulatory fines, over $100 million in customer settlements, millions more in breach response, legal, and compliance costs. Their reputation took a hit. Their board had to testify. Their CISO faced internal scrutiny. And all of it could have been prevented with internal governance. So what do we take away from this? First, cloud isn't magic. You need a governance framework specific to cloud monitoring, alerting, regular audits, and access reviews. Second, know your role. Shared responsibility models aren't suggestions, they are contracts. Know yours and govern accordingly. Third, test your assumptions. You can't assume that audit logs aren't being read. You can't assume that configurations are right. Trust nothing. Verify everything. And fourth, third-party risk is everywhere. Even your most trusted vendor should be a part of your risk model. The cost of ignoring it? Ask Capital One. This breach wasn't about some clever hacker. It was about simple missteps, ignored alerts, and governance gaps. When it's done well, nothing happens. But when done poorly, everything falls apart. So let this be a reminder. GRC is not just about frameworks. It's about resilience. It's about visibility. It's about protecting people before the breach hits the headlines. If you found this video helpful, subscribe to our channel and drop a comment down below.